Welcome to the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. I want to tell you the story about the ugly baby. The ugly baby's name is Robert Hoge, H-O-G-E. When he was born, his mother thought he was such an ugly baby that she refused to look at him. In fact, she refused to take him home with her. And that moment shaped his life. But not in the way you might expect. And hearing how Robert has redefined what it means to live a life being labeled ugly and disabled is truly inspiring. At the time when Robert was born in Australia, prenatal ultrasounds were nowhere near as common as they are today. So his mother had no advanced warning that her fifth child, a boy, would look radically different as a newborn. Robert says, "My mother had 4 healthy children before me, and to not have some shock when a child is born with some medical issues would be a surprise." You see, Robert was born with a large tumor in the middle of his face. Covered his entire face, the mask. And both of his legs were mangled. In hearing a description of how her son's appearance, from her husband, Robert's mother then refused to look at the child. When it came time for her to go home, she went without him. She wrote in her diary, "I wished he would go away or die or something." Now, it's the kind of admission you'd expect to be devastating to a child's self-esteem. Perhaps even something he'd spend the rest of his life trying to overcome. But it had just the opposite effect. In fact, it's become an integral part of Robert's story and identity. See, God blessed him with an incredible wisdom that he's now using to inspire others. In the course of it, his mother had a change of heart. Mom started visiting him at the hospital regularly, but still couldn't bring herself to take him home. She even told his sister, "He is so ugly." But gradually she began working through the issues in her own mind that were keeping her from loving that child. One morning the family took a vote on whether or not baby Robert should come home to live with them. The 4 siblings unanimously voted yes. And that was the day Robert became part of the family. Robert's mother used a little blue diary to document her struggles in accepting and managing her son's differences. Though the brutal honesty written on those pages is heartbreaking for most of us to hear, as a child, Robert felt quite differently. He regularly asked his mom to read aloud to him from her diary. And it helped mold him into the courageous and inspiring man he is today. I didn't really feel hurt by my mother being initially reluctant to take me home. It was like a movie that had some sad parts in the middle, but had a happy ending. I really appreciated how honest and frank my parents were with me. In fact, his mother always felt her initial rejection was an important message for all to understand. Robert underwent some of the most advanced facial reconstructive surgery Australia has ever seen. When a reporter met with the family to do a story, he recommended leaving out the part of Robert's mother not wanting him at first. But Mother insisted it be part of the article. That it was extremely important for others in similar situations to hear. And she said, no, it's good. Because this is going to happen to other women. And they should know that this is a natural reaction. Certainly, there are those who have an immediate connection with their baby, regardless of any deformity or medical complications. But for some, it's a completely traumatic experience. Robert's mom wanted those people to see hope in her story rather than shame. To understand it takes time, but it's completely possible to move past the shock to acceptance. Rather than being hurt by his mother's reaction, Robert understood it with the type of grace that can only be described as divine. He explains she saw her son lying in a cot with a big tumor as big as a newborn baby's fist in the middle of his face, eyes at the side of his head, deformed legs, and I can't imagine how upsetting that must have been for her at the time. And in her commitment to overcome such powerful emotions, Robert saw love. There should be nothing wrong with a newborn baby. It should be a wonderful moment where you can say, "Look, my child is perfect," he said. When a child is born, every parent is owed that. And so my mother's reaction, I think, was quite natural. Shock, disbelief, anger, rejection, and then working through it slowly. What would have been damaging for many, Robert used as motivation. He found the strength to accept his differences, but also the realization that he's not being defined by them. Robert has lived boldly, never allowing his differences to hold him back. And his story is inspiring for us all because he had to learn to accept himself for who he is, something each of us must do regardless of appearance or physical ability. Robert says everyone's uglier than they think they are. Everyone's more beautiful than they think, too. Robert is now married with 2 children of his own. He has worked as a journalist and a well-respected political advisor. Now he encourages others as a disability advocate and uses his story to inspire with the release of his memoir titled Ugly. What he calls a beautiful story about one very ugly kid. Now, while some people dislike the title, Robert says he genuinely agrees that he is ugly by society's standards and has no problem describing himself that way. We should stop trying to convince kids that their appearance doesn't matter by pretending that differences in appearances don't exist. Kids have a whole range of appearance. They look different, and that's okay. We should not pretend that everyone looks the same, because they don't. In this article, there was a picture of Robert and his wife, and Robert is holding their child, a son. The child looks to be maybe a year old. His wife is truly a beautiful woman. And the baby bears no scars, no marks from his father. And yet there stands his father, the very center of his face, littered with scar tissue and indications of surgeries where they work time after time to get that tumor out of there and try to reconstruct the front of his face. The part you see when you look at somebody right there is disfigured. It's reddish and it's scrunched up different. It's not near as bad as I thought it was going to be, having seen the picture of a baby. The baby's picture is truly, truly shocking. The story of what positive thinking can do, the story of what God does, because God don't make no junk.